Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, 8th chapter, text number 37. Api adya na tvam svakrita ihita prabho apyadyanastvam svakrite hita prabho jihasasi svet suhradaha anujivinaha jihasasi svet suhrado anujivinaha esham na cha anyat bhavataha padambujat esham na chanyad bhavata padambujat parayanam rajasu yojita amhasam parayanam rajasu yojitam hasam apyadyanastvam svakrite hita prabho jihasisi svet suhrido nujivinaha esham na chanyad bhavata padambujat parayanam rajasu yojitam hasam apyadyanastvam svakrite hita prabho jihasasi svet suhrido nujivinaha esham na chanyad bhavata padambujat parayanam rajasu yojitam hasam apyadyanastvam svakrite hita prabho jihasasi svirno nujivinaha shamna chanyad bhavata padambujat parayanam rajasu yojitam hasam Yojitam hasam apyadyanastvam svakrite hita prabho jihasasi svet suhrido nujivinaha esham na chanyad bhavata padambujat parayanam rajasu yojitam hasam. Synonyms: api, if; adya, today; na, us; tvam, you; svakrita, self-executed; ihita, all duties; prabho, O my Lord; jihasasi, giving up; svet, possibly; suhradaha, intimate friends; anujivinaha, living at the mercy of; esham, of whom; na, nor; cha, and; anyat, anyone else; bhavataha, your; padambujat, from the lotus feet; parayanam, dependent; rajashu, onto the kings. Yojita engaged in Amhasam enmity. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swamy Srila Prabhupada Ki. Translation: O my Lord, you have executed all duties yourself. Are you leaving us today? Though we are completely dependent on your mercy and have no one else to protect us, now with all kings are at enmity with us. Please repeat the translation. O my Lord, you have executed all duties yourself. Are you leaving us today? Today we are completely dependent on your mercy and have no one else to protect us. Now with all kings are at enmity with us. Purport. The Pandavas are most fortunate because, with all good luck, they were entirely dependent on the mercy of the Lord. In the material world, to be dependent on the mercy of someone else is the utmost sign of misfortune. But in the case of our transcendental relation with the Lord, it is the most fortunate case when we live completely dependent on Him. The material disease is due to thinking of becoming independent of everything. But the cruel material nature does not allow us to become independent. The false attempt to become independent of the stringent laws of nature is known as the material advancement of experimental knowledge. The whole material world is moving on the false attempt to becoming independent of the laws of nature. Beginning from Ravana, who wanted to prepare a direct staircase to the planets of heaven, down to the present age, they are trying to overcome the laws of nature. They are trying now to approach different planetary systems by electronic mechanical power. But the highest goal of human civilization is to work hard under the guidance of the Lord and become completely dependent on Him. The highest achievement of perfect civilization is to work with valor, but at the same time depend completely on the Lord. The Pandavas were the ideal executors of the standard of civilization. Undoubtedly, they were completely dependent on the goodwill of Lord Sri Krishna, but they were not ideal parasites of the Lord. They were all highly qualified both by personal character and by physical activities. Still, they always looked for the mercy of the Lord because they knew that every living being is dependent by the constitutional position. The perfection of life is, therefore, to become dependent on the will of the Lord instead of becoming falsely independent of the material world. Those who try to become falsely independent of the Lord are called anatha, or without any guardian, whereas those who are completely dependent on the will of the Lord are called sanatha, or those having someone to protect them. Therefore, we must try to be sanatha so that we can always be protected from the unfavorable conditions of material existence. By the deluding power of the external material nature, we forget that the material condition of life is the most undesirable perplexity. The Bhagavad Gita therefore directs us 7.19 that after many births, one fortunate person becomes aware of the fact that Vasudeva is all in all, and that the best way of leading one's life is to surrender on to Him completely. This is the sign of a Mahatma. All the members of the Pandava family were Mahatmas in household life. Maharaj Yudhishthira was the head of the Mahatmas, and Queen Kunti Devi was the mother. The lessons of the Bhagavad Gita and all the Puranas, especially the Bhagavata Purana, are therefore inevitably connected with the history of the Pandava Mahatmas. For them, separation from the Lord was just like a separation of a fish from water. Srimati Kunti Devi therefore felt such separation like a thunderbolt, and the whole prayer of the queen is to try to persuade the Lord to stay with them. After the battle of Kurukshetra, although the inimical kings were killed, their sons and grandsons were still there to deal with the Pandavas. It is not only the Pandavas who were put into the condition of enmity, but all of us are always in such a condition, and the best way of living is to become completely dependent on the will of the Lord and thereby overcome all difficulties of material existence. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport. Om Ajnanathmirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Ena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Bhaktivedanta Swamin Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. We are reading the prayers offered by Queen Kunti. This is the situation where the Kurukshetra war concluded and the Pandavas were coronated to rule the kingdom, and Krishna, having executed his duties to uphold his devotees, dear devotees Pandavas, he was bidding a farewell. And that's the time when Kunti Maharani, his aunt, is praying or persuading to stay back for some more days. So the reason that she mentions here is, in the translation, you have executed all duties yourself. Are you leaving us today? Though we are completely dependent on your mercy and have no one else to protect us, now with all kings are at enmity with us. So she was kind of not able to take the situation where Krishna is without them. So that's why she is referring, are you thinking that we are free now that we have got the kingdom? We are not yet free, for the reason that the kings of the Pandavas, or the Kauravas, have been killed, but their sons and grandsons are still with us at enmity. So she is referring that unless you are around, we don't think our position as of now as a kings of Hastinapura will continue. So here she is showing the dependence very nicely. Esham na cha anyat bhavata padambuja. Na anyat. There is nobody else except you. Various situations. But she is referring, na anyat. Nobody else can be more dependable than you. So she is referring, are you thinking like that we are now free? No. So one more thing is, she is referring, although she knows she is elder, she is the aunt of Krishna, and Krishna having come to take her blessings, but knowing the situation or the position of Krishna, Kunti Maharani addresses him as Prabhu. She is never addressing as a nephew. She is addressing as Prabhu, oh my Lord. So she is also referring that you are the Suhrada, Anujivinaha. Suhrada, well-wisher. Anujivinaha, we are living at your mercy only. Anujivinaha. So, we are living only at your mercy. So, never ever leave us. So, we are always dependent on you. So, Prabhupada very nicely brings in the context. Prayers and her thought process as a devotee, pure devotee, contrasts with the present people's contemporary world's context or the understanding. Prabhupada says, in the material world, to be dependent on the mercy of someone else is the utmost sign of misfortune. If you are dependent on somebody, what do they call? They are misfortunate. They are not able to withstand themselves. That's the understanding they get. All the more, we see everybody wants to be independent, right? Independent houses, independent families, right? And all the more with the Western culture coming in, it is told there at the age of 15 only they want to be independent. So the more independent the nature that is bringing them, the more they will be bound by the laws of nature. The laws of nature doesn't work on somebody's will, or it has its own material nature is created for some reason. The whole purpose, the Prabhupada very nicely mentioned this one sentence: the material disease is due to thinking of becoming independent of everything. Everybody wants to become independent of everything. That's the material disease, it seems. So, the idea that when we see somebody misfortune because they are dependent on somebody, a great misunderstanding. So, but in the case of our transcendental relation with the Lord, it is the most fortunate case when we are living completely dependent on Him. So, in the transcendental state, when we are in the situation of being dependent on the Lord, that's called the most fortunate state. So, we see the contrast here, how people have developed their own understanding to be independent, and they have realized, few people have realized that independent families, all this will not work. They need some support and dependency. And people, elderly people, they may have some material experiences. That also they miss out trying to become independent. And now, to become dependent on the Lord, on the transcendental state, is what is addressed by Prabhupada. So, a very nice statement that Prabhupada puts in here. The perfection of life is, therefore, to become dependent on the will of the Lord instead of becoming falsely independent in the material world. Those who try to become falsely independent of the Lord are called anatha. Prabhupada is making this statement. Those who are trying to become falsely independent of the Lord are called anatha. Generally, whom do we call anatha? There are anatha ashrayalas, right? Those who have no guardians, those who have no parents. So Prabhupada is telling, if you are independent of God, then you are called anatha. Not that your parents are there, then you are not anatha. Shri Radha Govinda ki. And one more statement Prabhupada makes: those who are completely dependent on the will of the Lord are called sanatha. So, if you are dependent on Lord, then you are called sanatha. If you are not dependent on the Lord, then you are called anatha. So, we should see the striking clarity that Prabhupada gives us and the definitions he gives us. We all have developed some definitions with our upbringing, right? the definition that Prabhupada gives of a word miser. Generally, when we are growing up, whom do we call a miser? A person who doesn't probably spend more, even though he has, right? That's our inbuilt understanding. Prabhupada says, if they are not utilizing this body and mind for Krishna, they are called misers. These definitions sometimes are very contrasting. And now this has to sink in, because this is the true definition. Somehow we have put false identifications with the definitions of the names that we use generally. Just like this, the word that we use here, anatha. Generally we think, okay, somebody is having no guardian or no parent or etc. They are called anatha. But Prabhupada says, if you are not dependent on God, then you are anatha. So the definitions will bring us how much it is important for us to deal with Krishna's relation. Otherwise, we'll just be carried away with the bodily conceptions that brings in parents. Of course, we do respect, due respect is there for everybody, being in this nature, being in this world, being in the contemporary situations, but we have to know what is the true definition. So I was reading this, and then it was quite striking, and then I had come out of my room, and then I was meeting some of the devotees, and then we want to share something which is striking with our devotees, right? So I mentioned, this I had mentioned to one of the devotees, saying Prabhupada is telling like this, that anatha means who is not dependent on who is not dependent on Krishna. Then again the contrast is sanatana. Sanata means who are dependent on Krishna. Then I asked him, are you sanata or anatha? Then the answer was very interesting. He said, when I am chanting, I am sanata. When I am not chanting, I am anatha. So basically, he's putting it simple that we have to be in relation with the Lord all the time. It was not a contest that I want to discuss with him, just the point that it came out, and the devotee's reflection was so quick. Because we know, Kirtaniya Sada Hari. Always chant, always sing. So, if that is not the position that we are in, then we are somewhere in the position of Maya. So, when I asked him, are you Sanata or Anatha? His question was, okay, I am a devotee, I should be Sanata. He didn't mention that. He said, when I am chanting, then I am Sanata. So that means, we know sometimes of the day, we are as Anatha. We feel, I am dependent on nobody else or something else other than Krishna. So, in our day-to-day circumstances also, we can learn these statements, how much they imply to our lives. So, one more instance, because we see some devotees coming in and travel, right? So, here the contrast, when I was reading this, Prabhupada makes the statement here. Yeah. They will be highly qualified both. Okay, he is referring to Pandavas. They are highly qualified both in their personal character and physical activities. Still, they always looked for the mercy of the Lord because they knew that every living being is a dependent by constitutional position. So, Pandavas, they knew they are always dependent, and by what? Constitutional position. So, we use this word constitutional position quite often, referring to the words, what is that? Sorry? Yeah. Mamaivamsha jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana anasyastan indriyani prakritistani karshati. Yeah, this also refers. And the constitutional is Swarupa. What is our Swarupa? Jivera Swarupa hoy Nityera Krishna Das. So Swarupa means our constitutional position is to be Nitya Dasa of Krishna. So Prabhupada here is mentioning the Pandavas are always being dependent, knowing that their constitutional position is to be dependent on Krishna. So the devotees, when they came here, and then as part of the discussions, that devotee, as soon as that devotee had come from outstation, and then our devotee saw him, and he had mentioned something about the constitutional position. And this devotee reflected on him. Our position is always to be dependent. He made this gesture. Our position is never to be independent. These two statements or the signs that reflected on me much more. Our always position is to be dependent, and whom should we be depending on is a question. So when we read constitutional position, our Swarupa is to be Nitya Das. So even this signs that we make will reflect on how we do. It was not referring to this that he was mentioning this sign or this sign. No. On a whole, on a fly, he was mentioning that our position is always to be dependent, showing this sign. So even in our daily lives, we can figure out what exactly is our mood, and these signs and these interactions will always be helpful in reflecting and reiterating these statements. So one more statement, what Prabhupada mentions in this is, the Bhagavad Gita therefore directs us that after many, many births, one fortunate person becomes aware of the fact that Vasudeva is all in all, and the best way of leading one's life is to surrender on to him completely. We have heard this statement, is it? After many, many births, one gets to surrender on to Vasudeva Krishna. And this is a very fortunate person. So, referring to Pandavas, see what Prabhupada writes. The Pandavas are most fortunate because with all good luck, they were entirely dependent on the mercy of the Lord. Okay, surrendering depends on the fortune. Okay, Prabhupada says, whoever is surrendered, they are fortunate. And now, to be dependent on the Lord is the good luck, Prabhupada says. So, we have all wanting to surrender to Prabhupada and Krishna have somehow or other, rendering services in the position of being surrendered in the institution that he has created. So we feel fortunate. And now Prabhupada is referring to especially the Pandavas, the most fortunate because with all good luck they were entirely dependent on the Lord. So the dependency on the Lord comes little by luck, Prabhupada is saying. Generally we invariably use these words, luck and fortune, to be same. So Prabhupada refers in a different state. Because fortune, we don't know what is, when it comes, isn't it? When unfortunate situation comes. But luck is something different. So Prabhupada is telling, there may be many other people who are fortunate, but Pandavas are specially lucky to have this quality of being always dependent on the Lord. So this shows the intensity of being dependent on the Lord. Who is the dependable? Who is not dependable? Generally people depend on what? Money, then family, fame, name, society, right? They have so much, completely surety about that they will save us. But very contrast, nowhere else we will see except in Bhagavatam and scriptures that we should always be dependent on the acharyas, predecessor acharyas, Vaishnavas, Krishna and so forth. Otherwise, people are enamored by the statements that we were mentioning. Everybody has given their definitions of their own definitions of this life, but having understood the intensity of how much important these words make us is the take home for us. So it is very important to always feel dependent. Kunti Maharani is having great sons, Arjuna, Bhima, etc. She is never depending on them. They are warriors, they are well built. And she is saying, Na bhavata cha anyat. There's nobody else than you whom I can depend on. So always we have to be sure there is no other way than to surrender on to Krishna. And here we see, and if we remain in the position that our protection is Krishna and our duty is to serve Krishna, then our life is successful. So, being a surrendered devotee, being to be dependent, Prabhupada very nicely here mentions, undoubtedly they were completely dependent on the goodwill of Sri Krishna, but they were not idle parasites of the Lord. They were not that, they are not working. No. They were doing their duties, executing as a king, bringing up the people in Krishna consciousness. So, it showed them by example that how they have showed how the society has to be run. That's where Krishna took a personal interest to make Pandavas as the kings, so that he knows the whole kingdom will be slowly coming into Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, they were all ruled by ill-motivated Kauravas. So, with this I close. If you have any questions. Srimad Bhagavatam.